what you demand, what you offer, and what you avoid, and what each of these says about you. You chose the people around you, some consciously, most unconsciously, and those people, the ones who stayed, the ones who left, the ones you let go, the ones you held on to longer than you should have, they all said something about you. Not about them, about you. What you needed from each one, what you couldn't give, what you never asked for because asking was too difficult. Relationships have never been just about the other person. And this model, with all its virtues and flaws, established a template that you used for decades without realizing you were using it. You are 6, 7, 8 years old, and you observe. You don't analyze, you observe, with the brutal precision of someone who still has no filter. How your father spoke to your mother when he was angry, whether they resolved conflict or avoided it, whether love is demonstrated or assumed, whether asking is possible or a sign of weakness. This template is your first map of how relationships work. And when you start to have your own, in adolescence, in your 20s, in your 30s, you use this map, sometimes consciously, trying to repeat what worked, sometimes also consciously, trying to do the opposite of what didn't work, and often without realizing, simply repeating the pattern because it's the only map you know. You don't choose relationship patterns. They arrive before the choice. And here's something that takes decades to realize. Trying to do the opposite of the model you received is just as influenced by the model as repeating it. The child of an absent father who decides to be present in everything is still governed by the absence of the father. The daughter of a controlling mother who decides never to control is still governed by her mother's control. The freedom in relationships doesn't come from repeating or doing the opposite. It comes from examining the model with enough clarity to consciously choose what you want to keep, what you want to revise, and what you want to abandon. It's about what you needed and didn't receive, and what you're still looking for. You demand punctuality because you grew up in an unpredictable environment where you never knew what to expect. You demand recognition because there was someone important who rarely gave it. You demand space because there was a time when there was none. You demand total presence because you lived with absence disguised as presence. Each demand has a story, and the story is rarely about the person you are currently in a relationship with. It's about the accumulation of experiences that shaped what you feel you need to feel secure in a relationship. This doesn't invalidate the demand, but it contextualizes it. And when you understand where your demands come from, you can evaluate them differently. You can ask, is this what I genuinely need now? Or is it the scar of an old need that this person is being charged for a debt that isn't theirs? The hardest person to relate to is not the one in front of you. It's the older version of you that still exists in every relationship you have. 52 years old. You have relationships that work and relationships that have always cost more than they delivered. And if you look honestly at the patterns, what repeats in those that cost, what always appears in those that work, you will find something about yourself that none of the others can reveal alone. What you demand is the map of what still needs to be resolved internally. It's not weakness, it's information. And information can be used. But it's harder to see because avoidance is absence, and absences don't show up. You avoid conflict, so you hold it in. And what you hold in ferments until it comes out in a way that seems disproportionate to the situation that triggered it. You avoid asking, so you do everything alone and resent those who didn't offer help you never asked for. You avoid showing vulnerability, so the people around you don't know when you need it and interpret your distance as coldness. The avoidance makes sense. It emerged as protection at a time when protection made sense. Conflict was dangerous, so you learned to avoid it. Asking led to rejection, so you stopped asking. Vulnerability was exploited, so you hid it. But what protected you in one phase of life can cost you dearly in a later phase. The avoidance that protected the child can isolate the adult. The self-sufficiency that worked in your 20s can create loneliness in your 50s. The cost of what you avoid doesn't appear at the moment you avoid it. It shows up in the distance that is created over time, and one day you look and no longer know how to cross it. Examining what you avoid is not a call to stop having boundaries. It's a call to distinguish the genuine boundary, which protects something real, from the automatic avoidance, which protects a fear that may no longer be as big as it seemed when you learned it. The symbol changes. The need remains the same, until one day it ceases to exist. What pattern do you recognize in your relationships? What repeats? What you always demand? What you always avoid? You don't need to have an answer. You just need to look. Next week, loneliness, not as a problem, but as a fact. Position invisible EP02 relationships have never been just about the other. Loneliness has never been just absence. The pattern this episode describes operates before any conscious decision. It's what happens in the gap between stimulus and response. The gap so short that most people never realize it exists. Creating awareness of this gap is the work of this series. Not changing everything at once, but creating the minimum distance so that choice exists where there was once only automatism. Position Invisible was built to name what operates in silence. What you buy, what you avoid, what you display, what you hide. Each of these behaviors tells a story about what you learned you need to show to deserve belonging. This series does not judge these choices. It examines where they came from. There's a reason these behaviors resist direct examination. They work. They serve a real purpose of belonging, distinction, and social security. The problem isn't that they work. It's that they work so automatically that they are rarely chosen. They are executed. And what is executed without choice cannot be evaluated to see if it still serves. What has been learned about status, consumption, and identity can be examined. What can be examined can be questioned. And what can be questioned can, with time and honest work, be consciously chosen, kept because it genuinely serves, or set aside because it served a previous version of you that no longer exists. Take away from this conversation not a list of things to correct, but a question that continues to work. What is this episode name that you already felt but didn't have precise language to examine? This question does not require an immediate answer. The most valuable ones appear later, in everyday situations where you recognize the pattern and, for a moment, manage to create the distance between impulse and action.